From the New York Times, I'm Anna Martin. This is Modern Love. Rick Reiss had a big dilemma with his oldest son, Gabriel. Gabe was suffering and struggling, expressing intense anger and having violent outbursts. Rick and his wife did everything they could think of to try to help him. But nothing worked. None of the experts they consulted, none of the medications they tried. So when Gabe was 14, his parents made a decision that could seem hard to understand. They enrolled Gabe in a wilderness therapy program as a last resort. Before we get into the story, I want to say that these kinds of programs for quote-unquote troubled teens have gotten a lot of scrutiny since this essay was published almost 18 years ago. They've been broadly accused of using extreme and sometimes abusive disciplinary tactics, and their overall effectiveness is deeply contested. According to Gabe, he was not abused at the wilderness program he went to. But Rick's desperate decision to send his son there had long-lasting consequences for both of them. Today, I talked to Rick and then to Gabe about how they make sense of what happened, now that Gabe is an adult. Rick Reiss, welcome to Modern Love.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Rick, you wrote your Modern Love essay back in 2005 about your son, Gabe, who was a teenager at the time. Gabe was getting into a lot of trouble. He was putting himself at risk. And your essay is about this agonizing decision you felt like you had to make for him. Can you read it for me?
Sure. Happy to do so. It's dark. I lie in bed with my eyes open. The windows are closed, but I can still hear the gentle midnight roar of the New Jersey Turnpike just a quarter mile from the front door of my safe suburban home. Safe. That's a joke. If you could walk through my house, you'd see what my 14-year-old son has done. A hole in the wall, a closet without a door, a few shards of glass still beneath a recently repaired window. At 2 a.m., I go to my son's room to check on him. He asks me to rub his back. His skin is cool to the touch as my hand slides across his developing muscles. His thick hair is the color of henna. His eyes are dark and sophisticated. He is lean and muscular with long, elegant hands. He is a striking young man, just as he was a striking young boy. What he doesn't know is that these will be the last hours in his bed, in our house, for a long, long time. He must sense something's up. He can't sleep. I can't either. I haven't even tried. It's been a relatively good week. No major fights. Not much cursing. Our R-rated house, as his younger brother describes it, recently has been closer to PG, which makes this even harder. But the irresolvable problem, the breaking point for us, is that he has stopped going to school. He simply refuses. Instead, he stays up late and then sleeps in. He hangs around until his friends come home from school, when he leaves to join them. At 4 a.m., they arrive, right on time. I open the door and hear, much louder now, the sounds of cars rushing by on the turnpike. But their car, its engine cooling in my driveway, is quiet. 2 young men step out. So how do you do this? I ask. What if he resists? It's rare that anyone resists, says one of them. He goes on to explain a process called de-escalation. They're experienced, bright, articulate. They make a living going into strangers' homes and taking away their unsuspecting children to youth boot camps, private boarding schools, or, in our case, a therapeutic wilderness program. They're paid a lot of money by parents like us who hope that somehow, some way, our beautiful babies can be fixed. We enter our son's room. I press against his shoulder to wake him. He looks up and sees the escorts. What did I do now? I tell him to get up and get dressed. You shouldn't be surprised, I explain. You knew this would happen if you didn't go back to school. He curses and punches the wall. We love you, my wife and I say, and then, per the escort's instructions, we leave the room. From our bedroom, we hear the muffled sounds of conversation, but can't make out the words. There is no shouting. I think I hear him crying, but maybe that's wishful thinking. I hope he cares enough to cry. I hug my wife. We're not crying. We're too nervous to cry. And we look out our bedroom window to see the car making its way back to the New Jersey Turnpike. In the morning, I go to work and wait for the call to let me know he has arrived safely. I can't stay home and think about it. I need to be distracted. And then I get the call. He's there. Our son's birth mother is a woman he has never known. A woman who answered our ad in the newspaper. My wife and I endured the trials of infertility. Like so many others, we were desperate, young, and naive. Then we got him, our boy. He was a star, a chatterbox, a whiz, the delight of all who were lucky enough to cross his path. A few years later, my wife gave birth to a boy, and then another. And then our first son was adored not only by his parents, but by his younger brothers too. We felt blessed. So it's hard for us to imagine how this child, surrounded by so much love, could turn out to be so lost. Perhaps it was the ADHD, or the plethora of medications that never worked for more than a few weeks. Perhaps it was the loss of someone he never knew, his biological parent. At age 3, he began to show a temper. At 6, he developed an attitude. At 10, he struck a classmate. At 14, he was spiraling out of control. His mother and I grew convinced that our love was not enough to help him, so we looked into having him taken away to people who could. We researched it, examined the costs, talked to everyone we could find. And we put up all of our assets to pay for it, mortgaged the house, spent his college fund. It's all gone to this. A financial hardship? Yes. But how could we not? Every night that he's gone, I silently call out his name as I lie in bed, hoping to reach him telepathically, hoping he's thinking of me. He writes us horrific letters, rife with the contempt and venom that often filled our home. They are idle threats from a frightened child. His counselors assure us that he is doing well and that in time his attitude will change. Living in a sleeping bag under a tarp, they say, does that to a person. Our son's wilderness experience lasts 7 weeks, and then we are reunited. When we do see him that first time, he is cold and nasty to us, having recently learned that he is not coming home, but instead going straight from wilderness to boarding school. Part of me is confident that we have done the right thing. Maybe it has even saved his life. Now it's late, and he's asleep. His room is quiet, dark. I walk down the stairs to the kitchen. On the wall of the stairway is his baby portrait. I lean toward it, kiss his beautiful 1-year-old face, and pray that the worst is over.
Thank you so much for reading your essay, Rick.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been 18 years. How does it feel to read?
It's hard to read, actually. I'm not sure I think about that period that much anymore, probably for good reason. So, yeah, it's a little difficult to read that again.
You write that after this wilderness program, Gabe went basically straight to boarding school. So this was not the end of your struggles with him?
Oh, not at all. I mean, we knew when we sent him to the wilderness program that he was not coming home immediately afterwards. It was all part of a plan that you work out with advisors. But he didn't know that. And when he found out about that, he was really very, very upset with us. But we felt we had no choice. The wilderness program is supposed to be like, shock and awe. To get them to see that they really need to change their lives. And then you send them off to, in our case, a therapeutic boarding school. He was there for about 15 months.
Mm-hmm. Shock and awe is a kind of military term. It indicates a very forceful decision to me.
Well, yeah. I mean, at that time, we wanted him to realize that his behavior got him in this place. And after we looked at every option possible, we came to the conclusion that this was the last resort, that this was our last chance to help him help himself.
As Gabe got older, things got worse and worse for him.
Yes, absolutely.
Can you describe what was happening?
He was thrown out of the therapeutic boarding school after 15 months.
That he went to after the wilderness program.
Correct. And they were very direct with my wife and I, and they said, do not take him home, send him to a lockdown boarding school.
Wow.
And we really struggled with that decision, and we decided, no, we're going to bring him home. And if it gets worse, we can always ship him away, for lack of a better term.
Wow.
So we did bring him home, and very slowly, it got to where it was before, and then it got worse. He got more involved in drugs, which he really had not done so the first time around. And then we were having to deal with the police, and he had been in juvenile detention for a while, and he was violent, more violent than before. And it became an issue for us. It was a matter of safety. I like to say the first time we sent him away, it was for him. Yeah. The second time we sent him away, it was for us. So when he was 17, we sent him away again, and it was the exact same thing. We had a couple of guys come into our house in the middle of the night and take him. The difference being that when he was 14, he was relatively compliant. When he was 17, much bigger, he was not compliant at all, and they actually had to handcuff him, and it was awful. And, I had no illusions that this was going to make things any better. I just knew that there was no other choice for us, and I was just praying that this last time it might make a difference.
And did sending him away this time make a difference?
Well, he finished high school there. He came home, and just as before, his old behaviors returned. This time, even worse. The drug use became rampant. He was stealing from us and others. He was in and out of rehab, I'm going to say, over a 10-year period, 5 or 6 times, I think. And he last relapsed a little over 2.5 years ago, and it was very, very ugly. And we just kind of washed our hands of it. In the past, we had gotten involved. We would get him, someplace where he could dry out. We would get him into a facility and do everything that we had to do. This time, we took a very different approach. We said, you know what you need to do it.
Wow.
So he's had quite a run for a good dozen years, in and out of these rehabs and sober houses and places like that.
God, Rick, I have to tell you, I am not a parent myself, but that sounds so hard.
Yeah. Well, it's heart-wrenching. And of course, one of the things that Gabriel likes to say whenever we bring up the past to us, he says, well, that was in the past, that was then. And so I suppose I've adopted a bit of that philosophy. It was a horrible time for us. And our friends who knew what we were going through just couldn't imagine what that was like. Our parents couldn't imagine that was like. So you have all these different people that know your story. They're trying to understand your story, but none of them live it. Now, Gabe is 33, and he still struggles, but he's in a better place now. So at least I can look back at all of that trauma and say, well, we're past that for now. He's doing okay.
What changed from your perspective to get him to this place?
Well, I think you have to know that after he relapsed and then some pretty awful things happened, finally, I would say, 2 or 3 months later, he recognized what he had to do, and he got himself into a program in Florida. And for whatever reason, this program clicked, and he had a therapist that he really liked, and he still sees her once a week, and they put him on a cocktail of meds that seems to be helping, and he recognizes that. So that's a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. 18 years later, do you feel like you did the right thing by sending Gabe to that first wilderness program?
Certainly at the time we did. In hindsight, no. I think what we did when we sent him away is we just delayed the inevitable. And the inevitable was very ugly. So we got a break, and we needed a break. We desperately needed a break. But I don't think it had any great long-term benefit for him.
It sounds like you're coming to a kind of acceptance about this experience. Does that feel fair to say?
Well, yeah, for sure. Look, you can't change it. It's done, right? And maybe at some level it did help him. He does have this wonderful appreciation for nature, which I share with him, that I think came from his wilderness experience. But I don't think I can look back and say I failed as a parent now. I can look back and say I did the best I could with whatever resources I had. And, what parent can do any more than that?
What does your relationship with Gabriel look like these days?
It's good. I would say I talk to him, my wife too, at least 2 or 3 times a week.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Gabriel and I took a couple of vacations together, just the two of us. We went out to Sedona for a week and did some hiking and had a fabulous time out there. I took him to England and to Ireland for a couple of weeks a few years back. And I'll tell you something else about Gabriel, and I think this is true of me as well, is that he has the ability to laugh at himself, which I think is a great strength. I'll tell you quickly a quick story. So the night when he was 14, when the guys came to take him away, we had a small snowstorm during the day. And that evening, I asked Gabriel to shovel the walk to our front door. And I told him I would pay for it. He shoveled the walk. He was being okay that day. And later that evening, the guys came and took him away. Well, to this day, he reminds me that I still owe him the money for shoveling the walk. As a joke.
Oh my God.
I gotcha. Yeah. So that's Gabe. Because he can laugh at it. He can say, oh yeah, you forgot to give me the $2 for shoveling the walk.
Wait, Rick, why don't you give him the $2? You haven't given him the $2 in 18 years?
I think I've given him a lot more than $2, I hate to say.
It's not $2. It was $25.
After the break, I get Gabe's point of view. That's next. Gabe Reiss, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So I talked to your dad, Rick. And at the end of our conversation, he was telling me about how positive your relationship is. It sounds like things are really good between the two of you. Is that how you feel?
Oh, yeah. We get along much easier these days. I mean, it's a much different time than it was then.
So your dad's essay is about the night you got taken to the wilderness program. But if you're willing to go there, I'd love to know what you remember from that night.
So long ago. But I just remember my door creaking open, and there were men I'd never seen before in my room. And they told me that I had to get up and get dressed and go with them. And I didn't like that very much. And, they started driving me to North Carolina. I didn't know what was going to happen. I remember at the time they're telling me I'm going to live in the woods. I'm all confused. Like, what do you mean? They kind of tried to mentally prep me. Like, they're going to hand you what you're going to wear for the next 6 months, all your gear to survive in the North Carolina wilderness, where, there's no bathrooms, there's no tents. I was using a tarp to make a tent every night. I had to make my backpack out of ground plastic and string and learn how to tie those knots. Like,
wow.
It was above and beyond wilderness. I remember actually the first campsite we were ever at, and it was all these big pieces of stone sat in a circle around a campfire pit that someone had built out there while hiking. And I just remember it was a beautiful, beautiful campsite. And I think probably the first night that I finally came out of the tent and tried to really just get aware of my surroundings, I just remember it just being beautiful where we were. And it was just, you could see all the stars you can't see because of the city, It was peaceful out there. That was the one thing.
Did you understand why your parents had taken such a drastic step?
I mean, I think I did. I don't think I cared.
Okay.
I had anger issues. I could always see it. Sometimes it used to feel uncontrollable how angry I would get. I wanted to fight the world or whatever was in front of me, or it could have been anything, a person, a door, a wall. I didn't always know where to put my anger.
After you finished this wilderness program, you were sent immediately off to a boarding school. Did you feel like those experiences worked? Did you feel like you changed?
I don't know if I'd say I think that I changed for the better. I was much more against therapy after that.
Okay.
I think that I was much more against school. I think that drugs became more attractive.
Wow. Okay. So it really kind of did the opposite of what was intended.
Oh, yeah. I think it was a bit more harmful.
When we talked to your dad, he said that stuff got pretty tough once you got back home. Are you able to give me some sort of sense of what happened in those years?
Well, if I'm remembering correctly, I think that those were the years where I started drinking and I started partying a little more, probably smoking weed. And the years from then until I went to my next boarding school was just very hazed out, very blurred out just from using. The worst drugs didn't come until the end of my teens, into my 20s. A little bit of ecstasy, a little bit of pills, pain pills. And then, later in life, I tried heroin for the first time. And from there, lost 5 years to that and ended up mixing it with coke and crack and done a lot.
Would you see your parents during this time?
Here and there. My mom had breast cancer when I was using IV pretty bad. And I do remember a time I came over there because I had no money and she was all hooked up to pain pumps, and I think she had a monitor or something else. And I was at her bedside asking her for money, and that's a horrible memory to have, but I remember that very clearly.
Have you talked about that moment with your mom in the years since?
I'm sure we've revisited it, but There's just a lot. There was a lot that went into getting past those days. That's a whole other world.
Gabe, can I ask, are you still using?
Drugs? I've been clean for 2.5 years, going on 3.
Wow, that's amazing, Gabe. How do you feel?
Mentally, I'm good. I think that it's something that doesn't go away. So what I suffer from is I have bipolar 2, which actually I didn't even get fully diagnosed until I was 32 or 31.
So just recently?
Yeah. So about
Gotcha.
3 years ago, I finally found a good med balance. I'm more in control of my feelings on good days. And that anger, bipolar depression, that stuff never goes away. So no matter what, sometimes I have a rainy Wednesday, and things from the past will bother me. And that's just something I've learned to just deal with and roll with the punches. Versus back then, I would use things like substances and just so many things to numb it out. And to be able to live happy without needing to numb is great.
Gabe, that makes me so happy to hear you say. I want to know, you were so angry when your parents sent you away for the first time when you were 14. Do you forgive them now for making that call?
Oh, of course.
Yeah?
If to be mad this many years later over, something that's part of my story, it just wouldn't make sense. Back then, when I was 14 and they had sent me to the wilderness, I think there was a part where in my mind I believed I hated them, But I definitely felt like I made damaging choices which forced my parents' hands, because all they wanted me to do was not end up in jail or end up in juvenile hall. And they wanted good things to happen for me. So they wanted to try something different. And I think ever since that, we've been just working our way back slowly but surely, just by talking, really. It's all just communication.
I think it's so amazing and honestly, really beautifully surprising that you and your dad have this really close relationship. Do you want to have kids?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, so with that question, there's always that thought of, oh no, what if they come out with the same mental issues that I have? But I don't worry about that. I really don't. My family had adopted me at birth, and they loved me no matter what I did or what we went through. And I plan to love my kids the same way. That's how I was taught.
Gabe, thank you so much for sharing your story with me. I really appreciate talking to you today.
And of course, I really enjoyed this.
Modern Love is produced by Julia Botero, Christina Josa, and Riva Goldberg. It's edited by our executive producer, Jen Poyant, with help from Annabelle Bacon. This episode was mixed by Daniel Ramirez. Our show is recorded by Maddie Masiello, and fact-checking is by Naomi Sharp. The Modern Love theme music is by Dan Powell. Original music by Pat McCusker, Rowan Nemisto, and Diane Wong. Digital production by Mahima Chablani and Nell Galogli. The Modern Love column is edited by Daniel Jones. Mia Lee is the editor of Modern Love Projects. I'm Anna Martin. Thanks for listening.